Thank you. Be seated. We'd like to thank Lisa McKinney and her entire elections committee over here. They've been really outstanding on this. And Judy Toller is our timer for this afternoon, so she'll be the one who'll be keeping track of everybody and keeping us online. Thank you very much, and let's have a joyous afternoon. First introductions. Ms. Forrest, would you like to take the initial step? Introductions.
Yes. Hello, my name is Benita Forrest, and I'm sure everyone has either seen my interview on Channel 18 or read my bio in last month's Lake Currents, so I won't bore you with all of that again. Lem and I moved into the lake, my husband Lem, in 2011. We really love living here because Lake of the Woods seems to have it all. It has everything that we need as retirees, and it also seems to have everything that younger folks need who are just starting out their families. We have lived here for the past 8 years, and we've noticed over a time that there seems to be some diversity in the lake. Diversity in wealth, wants, needs, and priorities. But diversity doesn't have to be, nor is it a four-letter word. There is also another word that comes to mind, and that is compromise. With diversity, you must find compromise. It is my goal, if elected, to find that compromise. I'm not going to sit here and promise you that I'm going to change things in the lake. That is not my function, and I am only one vote. I can't fix things, and I can't lower your dues. I can't do it. I'd love to, but I won't be able to. And if I promise that, it's a hollow promise. But what I will promise is to listen to you, learn from you, and when I go to cast my vote at the board meetings, I will make that vote count for the entire community. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown?
Hello. Hello, everyone. When I retired a few years ago, I said, good, I'm done working. I'll never have to wear a tie again. Here we are. But the tie reminds me of hard work, certainly not a necessary thing to put on, but the hard work of the board is something that I have done and have been very honored to do for the past year. We've been very busy, and anytime I get involved with anything, I'm all in. This particular year, I am deeply involved in 6 different committees. I'm the liaison for 4 board committees, the Safety and Security, External Affairs, Board of Examiners, Pickleball Tennis. I'm also on the Fiber Optic Broadband Work Group to try to bring fiber optics to Lake of the Woods, and I'm the co-chair of the Security Fencing Ad Hoc Committee. So I've been very busy, and it is just an honor to be that busy, doing something that is very meaningful. We've been here 5 years, enjoy the community so much, and just want to serve it again. The board's been very busy this year as well with accomplishments we've had. We recovered embezzled funds, put into place some financial controls to try to prevent that from happening again. We formed an ad hoc audit committee to that end to again, try to head off any potentials for such things happening again. We are also pursuing means to recover our expenses in that endeavor. We've completed the CARC project this year. That's been a biggie. And secondly, have put in motion the referendum for ECC and lot violations. We have many challenges in front of us. First and foremost, stormwater management. There's a long-term problem we are facing. a 52-year-old community designed for 10-year storms, experienced 3 100-year storms this past summer. That is a very important goal of this board, one I want to try to stay in front of and want to continue to see through. We also have the Flat Run Forebay project, want to get that finished to stop 312 tons of sediment coming to our lake every year. Our 14th pond retrofit needs to be completed. I want to be around for that. Our budget is something we go through. It's very painful. The board struggles to keep our assessments in line. We took the assessment initial proposal from $107 down to $52 this year. We have one class of membership here at Lake of the Woods. We can't just, everybody has equal status. We can't just serve the richest of the rich or the poorest of the poor. We have to find that balance. Recent External Affairs Committee showed that we have a house that sold for $100,000, one that sold for $875,000 in the last month. There's also one listed right now for $1.15 million. So we have to balance the needs of the entire community. And you will notice, you've watched my voting record. Okay. I'd appreciate your vote. Always will vote for the community.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Aha. Okay. My name is Jennifer Zukowski. I'm a resident 29 years. My husband and I have raised 2 children in this community while I commuted to Washington, D.C. I've worked in law firms all my life. Most recently in D.C., I worked in 2 law firms as a recruiter and manager of professional development. Actually, it was manager of attorney employment and professional development. And in that role, I worked with lots of lawyers and provided lots of training for these attorneys to take advantage of. So I take a lot of pleasure in working with several leaders because all the partners think they're the leader. And it's been a pleasure doing that. I appreciate the challenge. I'm running for a second term. When I first ran, I wanted to give back to the community for helping me raise my children in a safe and fun environment for them. And I feel that with 3 years experience, I can do that even better. Oh, and I really would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
There we go. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Paul Conrad, and I've been living here at Lake of the Woods for over 10 years. But just in the last 5, I live on the small lake, and just in the last 5, I was just a weekender, and then the last 5 years I've come to live here full time. And I like being here. It's a wonderful place to live. And now that I have just this last, it was going to be in December, but now January, thanks to some of the stuff happening with the federal government, I retired second time. I'm an attorney, 2 careers. I first was an Army JAG officer. I was a law professor at the Army JAG School. And after that time, retired and then went to work for FEMA as their senior ethics counsel. I just retired right after the shutdown of the government. So I have time. I love living here and just want to participate and do what I can to help everybody here make this a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ternoy.
Okay, my name's Terry Terranor. You'll see my name on the ballot is Adrian. Terry is an abbreviation of the last name. Moved to Lake of the Woods back in 2012. Moved from upstate New York, Binghamton area, for those of you who might be familiar with that, just north of Pennsylvania. And moved here, my primary interest in the selling point of the development was the diversity and size. If you live in a small community, a small HOA, if something goes wrong, it can be a very severe hardship on everybody. I looked at this with 5,257 lots that even if something major went wrong, if you divide that cost over that 4,000 people, 4,000 lots, it makes a big difference and makes it more affordable for everyone. The other thing, I didn't want to go into a, quote, retirement community because I like being around kids. I like seeing young families. I like seeing the kids play. I enjoy Friday afternoons. They come in here and play basketball while we're shooting pool. So I want to make this community good for the children as well as for all strata of incomes within the community. I advertise on my car that I'm a conservative voice for the community. I don't have a lot of abbreviations and initials behind my name, haven't had a lot of formal schooling, and have never made a lot of money myself. Everything has had to be cash as you go. So I don't owe anybody anything, and I try to run things that way. Look at alternatives. How can we do this and get the job done effectively and for the benefit of the community with the least amount of expense? That's what I've been doing all of my life and want to continue doing it here for the community.
Thank you, sir. All right, now we'll start with the questions. And I believe we'll start with Mr. Brown for our first question. If elected as a director, will you support using money collected as new construction and renovation fees be used only for road repair and construction?
That is what we do with them. We have proposed this year that anything that might vary from that in any way would have to be justified and documented. What we have proposed this year on the board is that we put a special or separate accounting ledger in our budget that shows the income and the outflow of all new construction and renovation fees, so that any of our members can look at that and see what was taken in for new construction and what goes out. This year we budgeted $50,000 in there in the budget, but I think we came in around $400,000 worth of fees. So that is what they're for, the common purpose, the common grounds, the road fees, etc. It would take an extremely rare circumstance for us to move it into contingency, perhaps. But if so, it would be well documented and done so that everyone could see why it was done. 1 minute, is that what you said? Okay, so yes, I support using those for the intended purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
Yes, I'm a big supporter of using NCR for the roads, particularly our chip and seal roads. And as Pete mentioned, the storms that happened this year, 2017 through 2018, they not only caused flooding, they caused the ditches to wear away so that the chip and seal breaks off. And in a lot of places it's broken off and there are big drop-offs. So Bob Ho, one of our other directors, he is a big proponent of prioritizing and giving rationale, the pros and cons. So his suggestion that we prioritize NCR, and particularly with an eye to the roads, that's something that we've accepted as a board.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
There we go. I agree with Jennifer and Bob. I think that's exactly the right use of that money, is for those roads, particularly, as she mentioned, with the damage that's been going on because of the significant amount of rain. That makes the most sense.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ternhoy.
Yes, absolutely, I'm in favor of that. It is my understanding that years ago, that was the way it was, and should have remained that way. There were people on the board a number of years ago, and I've talked to a couple of people who were around at that time, that money was transferred to a general fund and used for other purposes. And I have advocated since I found out about that that money should definitely be set aside and used for the purpose that it was originally intended. The founders or whoever down the road said that they put those fees in place for disposal, destruction of buildings and the wear and tear on the roads, and then the bringing in of heavy materials to build new houses, and the charge per square foot of a house based on the projected damage that would be done to the roads. That obviously was the original intent, and we should go back to that and stress it very, very firmly.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest.
Thank you. Yes, I too am in favor of this. Make no mistake, it is your money. It has been approved for one purpose or another, and once it's allotted for that particular purpose, it should not be shuffled around. And if for one reason or another it has to be, then I think you should be made fully aware, not just us, but you, because it is your money. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question will start with Ms. Zukowski. Knowing that if you are elected, you will have only one vote out of 7, how will you make that vote count to improve Lake of the Woods?
That is a good question. Let me think about that. Usually, I like to listen to what the other board members say. So I listen carefully to what they say. And you'll notice in a lot of our board meetings that we have a lot of discussion in open session about what different people think. There's a lot of opinions. So I try to make an informed decision, not only with the information that's given to us, but taking into account what the other directors are suggesting as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I really don't have much disagreement with Jennifer. It's exactly the same thing. You know, you make the vote count by listening to what everybody says when there's an open session, getting your best advice, and then making the decision you believe is best after hearing the argument of all the parties.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Terranoy?
Yes, over the past year, I have become a voting member of the Rules Committee and of the Planning Committee, as well as liaison to 4 other committees. So my vote in the Rules Committee and in the Planning Committee has been one of a number. So I've already experienced that throughout the community. I am fairly bullheaded, and anyone who knows me knows that it's tough to change my mind once I've got my mind made up. But I am open-minded enough to listen to the people who differ from my opinion. I welcome that kind of discussion and am willing to listen. Doesn't mean I will always change my mind, but I will always try to convince other people that my way is the right way. I think we all feel that way when we have an opinion, and you do your best without coming to fisticuffs, and realize that your compatriots are also giving them the benefit of the doubt that they are doing what they feel is in the best interest of the community. And that's what we'll all be trying to do.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest?
I had said that I would listen to you. If elected, I am your representative. It's not what I want to vote for necessarily, it's what you want to vote for. I also said that I would learn from you because I am very new at this. So I will listen and learn from you, and I will vote based on what I have heard from you all. I want to vote my conscience, but I must, because I'm your representative, must vote how you want me to vote. So talk to me if elected. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
The first order of business for me is to read thoroughly all of the documentation we get. Before the board meetings, every board member, every board candidate is given a book that contains everything that's going to be discussed a week later. It is imperative to read that thoroughly. That's where most of our information about the subjects come up. To understand that thoroughly, and then to consider that as the way to make the right decision. Secondly, it involves negotiating with other board members to make sure, if you feel strongly about it, there is some give and take. It takes a majority vote to pass anything. This board of directors has worked very well together, and I'm sure the next board of directors will do the same. But it is a back and forth of negotiating to find out, each person has to discern what is best for the overall community. That's the way I will always vote, what I think is best. And sometimes I vote with majority, sometimes I don't. I feel, whatever I feel is right after the careful research is how I determine the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Mr. Conrad. If elected as a director, will you support better explanations in the lake currents for year-end financial variances? The positive variance shown is due to new construction and road fees being transferred before the audit has been completed.
Yes. I think that whenever there's a change from what's listed, that was the planned use of that money or anything, should be clearly put out to the membership who are paying for all these changes and things that the money's being used for. So I think that's the only smart thing and reasonable thing to do.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ternoy?
I don't think the public can have too much information on anything. The more we can tell them, the more open we can be and straightforward, the more likely we are to get their support. There have been things done in the past that the general public has not either had the information or has chosen not to avail themselves of it, and that has created some problems. But yes, any information that we can possibly give that doesn't violate any laws or privacy concerns should definitely be made available, and we should, as a board member, should be held accountable to the general membership for the decisions that we make.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest?
Yes, I agree that if there's any variance, we must be able to explain ourselves, and we must have full transparency. The more information you have, the more power you have. Information is, knowledge is power, so anything that should be reported on completely to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
A positive variance from new construction renovation fees has existed because in the past we have not been able to project how many new homes would be built or how many repairs or remodelings would occur. So there is typically has not been in the past a line item budgeted amount of revenue for that. However, as I said earlier, we have tried to remedy that by putting in a separate line. We'll try to better estimate what we might get. Again, this year is somewhere around $400,000, but with a complete accounting of inflow and outflow so that members can see it any time. And so we should not have as many bumps in the variance of that revenue that was just at the end of the year would show up as a big boost in revenue, but again, because we couldn't predict how much we would have coming in. So we're going to attempt to do that, but more importantly, we're going to track it, inflow and outflow. And we should not have the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
NCR is part of our income. It's how we project it, put it into the budget that is the problem. One of our directors, Walter Dirk, said the biggest problem is people don't know where that money goes. Well, it's always gone to the common area, but due to Walt's comments, we're going to now keep a separate accounting of what NCR is used for. And if it's used for anything other than the roads and the ditches and stormwater management, it will be in this report so people can see where it went. Whereas before, it was really difficult to see where NCR went. It's not a slush fund, it's used for the association. About putting it in Lake Currents, I don't think there's enough room in Lake Currents to put, there's enough room in Lake Currents to put the NCR report, absolutely, but there's not enough room to put everything in the Lake Currents. However, it can go on the website, and more information is going on the website. So that's one place, that's probably a better place to put it, I think.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question, and we'll start this with Mr. Taranoy. If you are elected, will you try to continue or change the direction of the board has taken in the last several years?
Ooh, what a loaded question that is. No, I think for the general purposes, the board has done a very good job leading us and helping to preserve the value of our property, and has done a very good job from a fiduciary standpoint. So I wouldn't be looking to make any major changes, but again, as Pete was talking about earlier, we get all the information a week or so before any meetings. We are able to research and look at the research other people have done on the project that is being proposed or any amendments that are being proposed. So it's incumbent upon the board member to go into that board meeting with that basic knowledge and be able to express his or her opinion and do it from an educated background. I don't think any one individual is going to change the direction of the board. That's why we'll only elect a few people each year. This year and last year were exceptions with 3. Normally it's 2 per year. That maintains some continuity from one year to the next, so we don't have drastic swings from one year to the next. And so as a general rule, keep the course, keep the ship stable, and don't really rock the boat, but make your opinions known.
Thank you, Sarah. Ms. Forrest.
Can't seem to get my timing down. The answer is no. I would not try to change anything, the direction of the board right now as it's, again, I can't. I'm only one vote. I cannot change the direction of the board. We live by rules, and there are certain rules that we have to uphold. So, and the board has done, this board, the past 2 boards that I am familiar with have done a wonderful job here in the lake. There might be 1 or 2 things that you would like to see happen sooner, but no, the answer is no. I would not want to see, I would not try to change the direction of the board.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
Well, as a current board member, I don't want to change the direction. I want to continue the growth of this board. I want to continue the growth of our community. The projects that I named earlier are necessary projects that we need to see through. We need to find the ways to fund those without breaking the bank. All of these are a direction I think that has been very well set, and we need to stay the course and set it through, and that is why I'm running again.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
I'm assuming the person who asked this question, when they say change the direction of the board, means can you make our assessments lower instead of higher? And I want to assure you, the board does everything it can to take care of the community without making the assessment incredibly high. Like when we go through the budget, things are put off that we feel like is costing us too much. When we go through the reserve schedule, those reserves, we have no controls. I mean, the reserves are projected by a proprietary formula by Miller Dodson. So we're going to have peaks and valleys. The board goes through the reserve study and tries to lower some of the peaks and maybe bring up some of the valleys so that it stays even. So my answer to that question is we are not trying to raise the assessment. We are trying to take care of LOA, and we are trying to do it very responsibly.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I have a little different view of this than probably the other members of the board, or of this panel. I think that there should be changes in direction when things happen that need to be discussed within the community. For instance, where we had the issue where there was embezzlement of funds here within Lake of the Woods, which probably is going to result in an increase in the annual charge for this coming year. That's something that there's been total silence. And I understand that the case hasn't been finalized for the individual who had, at least in the papers, it says he admitted to the embezzlement. But that kind of stuff, I don't think that we should keep quiet. I don't think it should be ignored. And that's something that I think that we as a community, since we're all paying to keep this place up, that needs to be discussed.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Ms. Forrest. The association has gone to great lengths to improve communication throughout the community, to include the lake currents, modifications to board meeting times and days, coffee with board members, blast emails, improved web applications, etc. Do you have any suggestions to improve existing methods or creation of new approaches?
Unfortunately, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. The only thing that I can say is, if elected, to reach out to you and encourage each and every one of you, each and every person that I come across, to please attend the community meetings. It is so important, because if you don't, you won't know what's going on. I certainly won't be able to help you in any way, because you won't be up here learning the facts. And without those facts, we won't be able to make a decision about how we want our vote to go. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
We have done a lot to improve communications. That was one of our board goals for this year. One of the things we're considering right now is space on our website. It would be nice to put a bigger library of things on the website so it's easier to access. Any member can get any document they want to see by simply going down to the Holcomb building and asking for that document in advance to be pulled, and you can read it. I said simply. It would be much simpler if you could look it up online. So we're looking at that, trying to expand that space on our website. I think Carolyn Brodeur has done a wonderful job of expanding our communications through Lake Currents, through all of the various means, through the social media, through the email blast, etc. Benita hit it right on the head. You can lead the water, but you need to read it. But it is there available, and we will continue to make it available and try to continue to improve it. The other thing that I would encourage any of you to do, you can communicate with whichever of us are on the board of directors by simply writing to the board at lowa.org. I encourage you to do that. But more importantly, even if you don't like me, you should ask me questions. You should come and see me. You should talk to every board member. That way your opinions are heard and known. That's what we're here for. We actually, the board works for the association. The association is here to provide for the welfare of our members, our 4,258 members. So that ultimately means we represent you in that manner, but we do represent the association. So keep that in mind. Your voice can be heard if you talk to the 7 people that are on your board of directors. Secondly, we will publish information as much as humanly possible, as space as we can afford to buy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
In my 3 years on the board, communications is always a topic, and we are constantly trying to improve communications. One of the things we do now is screen the live stream the board meetings so that you actually don't have to come to the meetings, but you can watch them easily if you go to our website, go to administrations, go all the way down, and it says videos, and those are on our website. In fact, this is going to be on our website. So, and Facebook has this information too. That's another new thing, at least since I've been on the board, that we have Facebook. We also have text messages for alerts. So our communications department is doing a lot for us, a lot more than it's had in years. So, oh yeah, and if you want to hear Carolyn Brodeur, our communication manager's last report, it is also streamed live in the last board meeting. So you can hear how we're trying to get more space to archive information and make it more searchable for you to find information.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
What I've seen is that the board has done a very good job of trying to get information out to people. The only concern that I would have is for some of the folks who are older and not computer literate, that if everything is going to streaming, those folks still, you might have to have some for those that aren't, paper or other ways to get that information. But other than that, I think they're doing an excellent job.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ternoy.
Just to reiterate, yes, there's plenty of information out there. It is disseminated in multiple forms. And just to repeat, you can't make that horse drink once you get him to the water. I have heard the figure that only about 15 to 20% of the people read the lake currents. If you've got less than 1 out of 5 families reading the information that we're disseminating, makes it awfully difficult to get their input as to what they want us to do. Case in point is the survey that we have just completed. Took me about 25 minutes to fill that out, and I'm sure the rest of you filled it out, did the same thing. We had 17% of the community fill out that survey. Makes it very difficult for anyone to determine the overall direction of the community when only 17% respond to a survey that is meant to do just that. So we send out all kinds of things. The Lake Currents is a product that is demanded not in the form that it is, but it's demanded by state regulations that we have to keep the members informed. And that is the vehicle that the community has chosen, and it is looked at by other communities as a very, very good communication tool. But if people don't read it, it doesn't help.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Mr. Brown. With the CARC project complete, the membership should soon know the exact amount of the bank loan. If the project comes in under budget as expected, what would you recommend for CARC assessment in the future? Continuing at $191 for 3 or more years to pay off the loan early, or reducing the assessment, as promised when the assessment began, to approximately $150 for the remaining 5 years of the loan?
My answer would be that we reduce the amount of the loan as was originally stated. $191 per year was based on the original figure. If it comes in under budget, we reduce the amount of that remaining assessment. So yes, I'm in favor of reducing the assessment period for that loan. It is simply a loan, not an ongoing evergreen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
I have a feeling that that question will come before the board. Personally, I would like to reduce the loan, but I will be happy to listen to what the other directors say and take that into account, because I don't know. Yeah, I'll have a vote, but that, yes, that's what I would do.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I would reduce the loan. Pretty simple.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chernoy.
I was doing some calculations on this just the other day and looking at basically $5 million we've collected or billed so far, just over $1.6 million in the $191 assessment for the last 2 years. If we were financing the $3.5 million balance, again, I'm using round figures, it comes out to something like $164. Looking at a $27 or $28 difference per year, I don't think anyone in this community, regardless, and I'm probably one of the lowest income in the community, $28 a year is not going to make a tinker's darn for the majority, virtually anyone. So keeping it at that 191 is something I feel very strongly that we should do. People are used to doing that. They've done it for the last 2 years. And it can save us many, many thousands of dollars in interest over the next 5-year life term of that $3.5 million. So from the standpoint of saving money for the community at the expense of $25 or $30 per resident per lot for the year, I think is a very, very good trade-off.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest.
I too would agree that if we can pay the loan off sooner, then by all means, because the interest rate would save us a lot more money in the long run, the sooner we get the loan paying off. I don't like bills when I check the mailbox, so I'm sure you don't either. So if we can get it paid off quicker, by all means. And again, since it's a minimal amount that would go back in your pockets over a course of a year, divided up day by day, it's just pennies. So I am in agreement. Get the loan paid off.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question will start with Ms. Zukowski. Speeding on our community streets and roads continue to be a huge and growing problem. What are your views on how to address this situation?
Well, I know our security group are trying to make sure that people aren't speeding, and I know that you are fined for these violations, so I'm not sure I know how to prevent it, because I already think security is trying very hard to prevent it. The officers I know, they work very hard to try and prevent speeding, so I'm not sure that as a director, a board director, there's anything I can do about that.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
There we go. I agree with Jennifer. I think that there is an adequate number of police officials, rent-a-cops, whatever you want to call them, here within Lake of the Woods to ensure that speeding is handled in a good manner. I don't know if it's worth spending extra money. If you were this community was a public, not a private entity, you wouldn't have half of the number of police officers you have within Lake of the Woods. So I don't think that's a huge thing to spend money on.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chernoy.
First, would you please repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood it completely.
Certainly. Speeding on our community streets and roads continue to be a huge and growing problem. What are your views on how to address this situation?
I haven't seen it myself as a real problem. I think our security people do an excellent job. The area in security that I've heard problems, and I don't live on the lake, so I can't address it personally, but I've heard that there's a lot of violations on the lake that are not being addressed. People will be stopped, they'll be told something. I don't know of anyone being stopped and admonished on the highways. If you're stopped, you get a ticket, and it's going to cost you 35 or 50 bucks, depending on how the LCC looks at it. But I would like to, and again, this is based on secondhand knowledge, people who live on the lake and have expressed concern over some of the things that go on in the lake, a little bit more enforcement of the regulations on the lakes might be more beneficial than some of the things on the roads.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest.
I think our security company here on the lake does an excellent job. And I would agree that if we were not a closed community, we wouldn't have half as many security or police force in any one given spot. I think they do an excellent job. I myself have been flashed to slow down, and I was only going a couple of miles over the speed limit at the time. So I have not heard of any particular event or neighborhood where there's speeding going on, but certainly if you let security know or any one of the board members know that there is an issue in your neighborhood, I'm sure that we can address that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
As a board, the thing we can do is support our LCC committee who hears the speeding complaints, etc. We do have speeding that occurs. We sometimes get appeals from the LCC decisions to the board. One of the things that we have done in the last year is the school bus. There was problems with people passing parked school buses. That now goes to Orange County and is prosecuted with an extremely high fine beyond the $50. The same thing for excessive speeding. If we catch you going an excessive amount, about 15 miles over the speed limit, you're subject to an Orange County fine that will break you of sucking eggs, if you will. So that is what we can do and are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question, and we'll start with Mr. Conrad. Have you served on any committees in LOA? If so, has it helped your understanding of the operations of LOA?
I believe I served on a couple of years ago on one of the committees, but I can't remember which one it was. And since I've been working till just this January, taking the VRE at 5 in the morning, etc., I haven't had a chance to really attend too many of the meetings. Now I know, I can't remember, one of the folks here, I was on the committee with, and I can't think of his, yeah, rules. Yes, I think it was rules. Okay, thank you. So yes, I did, but not real recently. But now that I am full-time, retired, I have time to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chernoy?
This past year has gone so fast. I've always heard growing up that the older you get, the faster the years go. And this past year, when I decided to run for the board a year ago, I also decided that I would become very involved in the community. Following the election last year, when I was one of the winners by not being elected, I had made a promise to a couple of the committees. During the course of the summer last year, I attended a number of committee meetings, but wasn't a member of any of those committees. I went to them to learn, to find out what was going on in the community and how this community operated. Following that, one person came up to me and said, geez, when you were at our committee meeting, you said that if you weren't elected, you would be asking to be on this committee. That happened to be the planning committee. I was appointed to the planning committee as a voting member, later to the rules committee as a voting member, and I've been a liaison committee member from the planning committee to the equestrian, the M&E, the clubhouse, and finance. Last year I sat in on the 3 days of the budget hearings based on the planning committee and the finance committee having the input that we had to the board for those. So because of my activities, I figured that I have attended something in the neighborhood of 50 committee meetings in the last 12 months. One way or another, I have tried to get to at least one committee meeting of every one of the 23 active committees we have in the community over the past year. There are 2 or 3 that I have not yet made it to, but for the most part, I have accomplished that goal.
Sir. Time, sir. Thank you. Ms. Forrest.
Prior to deciding to run for the board, no, I had not attended any committee meetings. I have, of course, now attended several over the past several months. But what I did do for 4 years is work at the Fairways Cafe, where I heard so much more from every committee. You'll be surprised how much you can learn just by bringing a cup of coffee or a hamburger to somebody. So, as I said in my introduction, I plan on becoming even more engaged than I am, but I'm not there yet, but I'm well on my way. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
Committees are the backbone of our organization, of our association. We have 21 standing committees. There's an ad hoc committee for fencing, etc. In fact, I'm with 6 committees, 72 for 12 months. I think I got you beat by just a hair, Terry, but the committees provide the information, the research, etc., the legwork, if you will, the heavy lifting for the board of directors to make their decisions. They function like mini boards. They have the same rules we have, or as the board has, for agendas, minutes, etc. It's very intense work. Those who serve on committees are to be commended. Many of our people who have previously served on the board of directors, when they're done with their term, once again serve on committees. Many of the people who have served on committees get elected to the board. So it is an integral part of what we do. I've learned so much by attending the committees for which I'm a liaison, etc. I encourage anyone who has interest in our community simply to go in to a committee meeting, sit and listen and learn. They're all open. All of our committee meetings are open, just as our board meetings. So attend committee meetings. You'll learn a lot about the community in which you live. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
Before I was on the board, I was on the fitness committee, and I didn't learn a lot about LOA from the fitness committee, but then I joined the planning committee, and I learned a whole lot about how LOA is run on the planning committee. While I was on the planning committee, they created the new asset and improvement form, and that was quite a chore. Well, also, I was in charge of putting together the land use study working with Dave Kraus, who was on the committee at the time. Since I've been on the board, I've been liaison to lots of committees, and I've come to appreciate the work that they put in. And we try, as vice president of the board, I like to bring as many committee ideas to the board and support as many ideas as we can possibly support. They don't all get approved, but they are all looked at by the board.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Mr. Terranoy. Approximately how many open lots are there for building?
It's my understanding that there are just over 200, 210, 212 was the last figure that I heard. I think that in the future, well, back up a little bit. There are some of those lots, one in particular that I'm aware of on Birdie, that is technically an available lot, but I certainly wouldn't want to build anything on it from a water standpoint and the runoff that we've had from the golf course in that particular location. Hopefully, we're going to be able to mitigate those problems in the future, but it's not going to be cheap to do so. I think that down the road, the majority of our building is going to be in the demolition of some of the older small buildings, 650, 700, 800 square foot buildings that people are going to want to move into this community, and those buildings are going to be the only ones that are going to be available, and they'll be torn down, and the ones built in the 50s and 60s will be torn down, and more modern, a little bit larger facilities will be put in those places, and we will have the road fees and so forth that will go along with those. I think that is a bigger revenue stream in the future than current empty lots.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest?
Could I have the question again, please?
Certainly. Approximately how many open lots are there for building?
It is my understanding that it's just over 200 lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I believe the number is actually a little closer to 400, but regardless of that exact number, I think this question goes to how will this affect our income for new construction and revenue for the future years. Obviously, once the homes are built out, that will slow down the new construction. However, there will be remodeling, etc. So we have to look at that realistically and say that's not a permanent revenue stream that we're going to have brand new homes built. There's about, whatever that exact number, as I think it's closer to 400, but that is it. When they're done, they're done. So then we will have renovation, reconstruction, etc. The per square foot fee for remodeling is far less than a per square foot fee for new construction. So as we budget, as we look into the future, that is a waning revenue stream. We'll have to be cognizant of that as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski?
Okay, this question has to do with NCR. And when we were talking about the reserves, changing our reserves, including the NCR reserve, that we discussed, one of the first things I did was call the ECC and called Rachel and the ECC to find out how many empty lots there were. So as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were 319 empty lots. That's where we stand right now.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad?
I have no idea, but Jennifer's number sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Our next question will start with Ms. Forrest. If elected as a director, will you support the strict adherence to remaining within budget annually other than catastrophic issues?
Yes, I would support that. I think that once a budget is passed, you must stay within the budget, and if you don't, there must be consequences of something. We must come up with something to encourage our managers to stay within their budget. And we must have incentives to make sure that they stay within the confines of their budget. Only in that way can we, as a community, be able to meet our bills, our budget. Everybody has to do their part. And if you get one area of the community that goes way over budget, he has to that area has to take money from other areas of the lake in order to meet, pay what they're over budget for. So yes, we must stay within the confines of our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
Coming through a business background, to me, budgets are mandatory. They're not goals. If you going to jump on an airplane and fly from here to San Francisco, it's just not a target. You want to land in San Francisco. You want to end up in Cleveland. So your budgets are mandatory. You have to stick with what you've built into a budget. Those have to be realistic. I think our administration does a good job of offering up realistic budgets. Even so, we cut into those budgets. This year, we've trimmed from $107 increase down to $52. Some very painful steps were taken. Some very meaningful things were left out because we have to try to find that balance of keeping our assessments reasonable, but still operating a 52-year-old infrastructure. So, but once we set those budgets, we need to stick with them. And that is how it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stokowski?
I think it's really important to stick with the budgets. Having said that, however, I know that last year the Equestrian Center did not make the revenue that they were expected to make. Neither did the Fitness Center, neither did golf. I know that golf's big problem was the weather, just all that rain. Hoping this year they'll have more revenue. Fitness Center membership is going up thanks to the new Fitness Center. The Equestrian Center actually filled up all its summer camps, which is one of its big sources of revenue. This year they did. Last year they didn't. So there's some things that we have no control over. And then some things break down, and you have to take money from reserves, one reserve or another. So we try to stick to the budget. And I think that it's really important to stick to the budget.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad?
I think you do have to stick to the budget because the board has spent a lot of time putting that budget together. And so, and they are representing us. So the question then becomes more, what do you consider a catastrophe then? So one person's catastrophe is someone's, that's something that should have, isn't a problem. So that's the only, but I think that generally, once the board makes a decision on the budget, there's been chance for people to have input. That should be it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ternoy?
Budgets are a little bit complicated. Again, having sat through a 3-day presentation of every one of the various managers in the development, listening to their proposals, listening to what they want to do, what they need to do, what they would like to do, it is a long process. There are things like the golf course not getting the revenue because of the excessive rain that we had last year. This year it might be because of excessive heat that we don't get the amount that we're anticipating. There are always going to be some variations. It is imperative upon the board to make sure that during those 3 days of budget hearings, we ask the right questions, that the managers that are presenting their proposals present those proposals with valid background checks. During those three days last year, I asked several questions about how did you come up with that figure? What alternatives did you look at for that particular project? It is my desire that any new expenditure be given at least 2 different choices. How can we solve this problem? How can we present this amenity in at least 2 different ways, one less expensive than the other? And do we always have to go with the most expensive? I don't think we do. I think we can do things a lot more economically than some places are doing. But once the budget is approved, then it's imperative that the manager of that facility do everything that they can to stay within that. And if not, have good reason for not.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Mr. Brown. In the 14th hole 4-bay project, glyphosate, an active ingredient in Roundup, was used to kill grass and returf the fairway. If the same product is used to returf most of the other holes on the golf course, what will you do as a board member to ensure water quality of our lakes and the health of and the safety of our low members and pets?
First thing we would do is look at what we have done with the 14th hole. Was it successful? Did it work? Secondly, I would ask that our golf course management look at alternatives to I can't pronounce it, glyphosates. It was just outlawed in California, I believe, and I don't know, or was it Japan? But it is an ingredient in Roundup. However, it is not Roundup that we used. It is a lesser of that, I think. But we killed the existing grass with it, and then we resprigged with new grass. I'm not sure how fast that came back as opposed to what it was predicted to do. So we have to take a hard look at how do we go about redoing the rest of the golf course in a manner that will be less harmful, because obviously we're Lake of the Woods. That's it's tantamount that we keep both lakes as healthy as possible. So we would seek alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
Okay, when I first heard about that, I was really worried. But it turned out that Chester Guzak got information online from the EPA. The amount we use is not, EPA does not say that it is dangerous for our lakes or for humans. I'm sure it's something we're going to keep looking at, but I know in the news it was reported as being really dangerous, but the people that were using it have been using it for years and in large amounts. I don't think we use it to that extent on our golf course.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I don't know much about the phosphate, but I think that the better thing is to act on behalf of children and animals and the water quality versus the golf course. If there's other alternatives, there may be other alternatives that may be less dangerous than using that phosphate. I don't know for a fact.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chernoy.
Everything is a compromise. Compromise has been mentioned by a couple of people in the past. You have to weigh the benefits and the risks on virtually everything you do. When you cross the street, you weigh the benefit of getting to the other side of the street versus the risk of being hit by a car. So everything we do is a risk analysis. And if the powers that be have done the research and found that that particular treatment was necessary and within safety guideline limits, then let's do it. If it's not, and people haven't done their due diligence and researched it properly, then we've got to sit back and wait until we get a good feel for what that risk is versus the benefit that we're going to supposedly get from it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest.
I would agree also with Terry. We must research what we use, and everything is a trade-off. I would prefer to err on the safe side than not, but if we're being faced with a problem, whether it be the grass on the 14th hole or the rest of the golf course or weeds within the lake, it's difficult. The only thing that I can say is research, 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 and then collect as much information as you can and then proceed. Sometimes there isn't. There's no win-win solution to many things that we have to do here in the lake to keep it safe. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question will begin with Ms. Zukowski. If elected, what actions will you champion to involve younger residents to become volunteers on either individual committees or even potential board candidates?
I'll tell you, when I first ran for the board, there was a young board candidate, and I was so for that candidate, but then the candidate didn't come to the meetings because he worked full-time and he worked far. So I think I would love to see more young people involved in committees and on the board, but it's important that if you are going to be involved, that you participate. That's where I stand.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I kind of agree with Jennifer saying if the people don't show up, it doesn't work. But I think we should encourage high school or college students who live here, if they can actually make it to meetings and stuff, to get them involved. I think it's great to have young people in the community involved with their community.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Terranoli.
We go back to the horse and water bit. You can tell them about it, you can encourage them to come, but if they don't see the benefit and don't see where they can learn from it and it will benefit them as individuals, we are in we've transitioned into a Me Too society where it's primarily me first, and how am I going to benefit from this? And I don't think that the youth of today, for the majority, are into that kind of thing. I would definitely encourage it, and I've had an opportunity to talk to some young people in some of the activities that I've been involved in the past year. And I have 6 grandchildren that I encourage to be active in their community and learn what's going on so that they be well informed. And I don't know what else we can do beyond that. I don't have any magic solutions.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest.
I don't have a magic solution either, but I would encourage people everywhere I go, and I do. And I think that as board members, I especially have heard, oh, it's a thankless job. I can't believe you're doing this. Why are you doing this? But I think if we approach it just a little bit differently, it really isn't a thankless job. It really isn't a lot of work. I've seen the board meetings. They try to work around your schedule. If you're not available to show up to a meeting, you can hook up via our technology. So there are many ways we can accommodate both the retired with a lot of time on their hands and the non-retired that only have 1 or 2 nights available a week. So I think we just have to keep plugging away and spread a positive message as opposed to a negative one. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
First thing we need to do, each one of us in this room, other than Travis and Luke, I don't see anyone in here under 40. Last Tuesday night's board meeting, not one person under age 40. This Saturday before that, not one person under age 40. Those board meetings were set by the board of directors specifically to reach the younger people so that they might be available to come. But let's face it, this stuff is pretty boring. It's very necessary, but it's boring to a young person. But what I would encourage each of us to do is to try to talk to your neighbors, try to tell them to get involved, try to get them to attend the meetings so they know what's going on. Those meetings are set on those schedules for that purpose, to try to reach those folks who are still working or trying to raise their young families, and their time is extremely limited. But we continue to plug along, continue to invite, we continue to ask you to invite them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Mr. Conrad. Do you support or oppose the current ECC referendum and why?
I'm not sure which ECC referendum you're talking about, so,
That's the Environmental Control Committee.
okay. I'm not familiar, so I can't answer that one.
Mr. Charnoy?
Yes, I am very strongly in favor of it. I'm very good friends with one of the people who is on the ECC committee I'm looking at now, and he feels that it's not necessary. But I think that anyone who has any kind of a fine or any kind of rejection of something that they would like to do, I don't think that there's any one group or individual that should have the authority to negate that desire. So having a method of at least challenging that, and the referendum is very limiting to various circumstances, a couple of specific circumstances that would dictate that the board would have an override position from that ECC. So my feeling is kind of mixed. I like to see somebody have the ability to challenge a decision made by other people. On the other hand, my experience with the ECC committee is that they really do due diligence and do a very good job of trying to follow federal, state, and local guidelines as far as building concerns are addressed, and not permit violations, and they go out of their way to try to say yes rather than going out of their way to say no. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I don't think it can hurt to have the referendum and be able to challenge something that you disagree with.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest?
I first want to say that the ECC committee, as well as all of our committees, work very hard. We have some very knowledgeable people in these committees. But they are just human, and sometimes they get it wrong. And I think the referendum just gives you a second opportunity to challenge an answer that they have given you, and I think it's always good to have a second avenue out there to help you and the community stay in touch with the laws that we have here in the lake, our building laws. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
I was one of the ones who was not a big fan of this referendum when it started, because it seemed to me it could be too broad and misinterpreted. However, the beauty of a board trying to work through things and get things done yielded something that is, I think, quite workable. There were some amendments to the referendum questions that were turned every way from Sunday. As Walt Dirks likes to say, you can come see how sausage is made. But we have a referendum now that will have a limited appeal process for an ECC decision. In the case they haven't followed the rules, or for some reason there is not an existing rule. This is not about, they told me I couldn't have a little pink house. It's about very specific things that can be appealed. And I think, therefore, it is a good thing that we have that opportunity to appeal it, as our board voted unanimously to put forth the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski?
Let me back up about young people, because we do have some young chairs of committees, and I should let you know that there are some young people out there who are working and chairing committees. But to this, I'm on the board, so I supported the referendum, but I was one of those directors who voted for limited appeal, and I certainly support charging for ECC violations.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Terranoy. What would the association how would the association get the funds for stormwater management projects on common property?
That is going to be the number one challenge for the board coming up and probably for the next 3 or 4 years. We have had one formal proposal, one formal study of one of the areas that is badly affected, and that came in at $1.65 million to fix one of the 3 or 4 bad problems we have. So if you extrapolate that, we're looking at another $5 or $6 million to fix the problems that have occurred and developed over the years with the additional buildings and the additional cover on the ground that prevents water from being absorbed, and instead it's running off into the lakes and into our gutters and into our neighbors' homes and into our neighbors' yards off of the golf course and so forth. So it is a major problem and one that absolutely has to be addressed. We had one person at one of the meetings state that he came from a development where the community was forced by law, there's precedence here, that the community had to buy the property that was being affected by some force of nature that the community was not abating. And if we have 20, 25, 30 homes that are being affected by that at an average of a couple $100,000, plus the loss of the $2,000 a year assessment, we're looking at potential losses to income to the community in excess of what it costs us to fix the problem. So we have to fix it.
Thank you, Sarah. Ms. Forrest?
Sadly, yes, we do have to take care of this. Where are we going to get the funds? At this point, I don't know. But somehow or another, we're going to have to address this issue because it's only going to get worse if we don't. And ultimately, it will cost a lot more money. It will cost your homes, whichever of your homes are affected by storm waters. So it is something we're going to have to address, and I'm sure it will be a hot topic for the next board, incoming board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
The elephant in the room is clearly that it has to come eventually from our assessments. That's where we get the money. That's our revenue stream. So we have to try to do what we can to mitigate the impact of that. Stormwater management is basically our ditches. The proposals that we have outstanding for Patrick Henry Court is that our culvert pipes are not big enough. So what can we do besides redoing the whole lake at one time? That is one proposal to do that, hopefully use as a template. But in the interim, we can do other things. Our ditches, the leaf removal from our ditches occurs maybe 2 times a year. We need to equip our maintenance staff with either the equipment personnel or contractors to help increase that number of leaf removal options and ditch cuttings. Secondly, the same thing with our repairs. Just this week, the crew was out working diligently on ditch repair. They did a beautiful job, placed it, put the green coating on it to hold it in place. We had a monsoon and wiped out half of the work. It is a very difficult thing to do to try to maintain it. But the better we can maintain our existing ditches, which are built for a 10-year rain. When you have 3 100-year rains within 30 days, that overwhelms anything. There is no way to prepare for 100-year storms effectively. They happen. But anyway, we attack it little by little, and then we are going to have to bite the big bullet for some of those things through an increase in our assessments. And that is a very painful choice that any board will have to make. But let's attack from the ground up. Water goes downhill. You have to have a 1/4 inch to the foot of downflow in order to get it to the lakes. We start from the lakes, we work back, keep the ditches clear. That's job number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Zukowski.
I've thought about this for a long time. In fact, the External Affairs Committee brought in two Board of Supervisor people from Orange County to meet with me and Phil and a few others to talk about what we can do as a county and from the state. Well, the state approved us getting grants or loans, but the county does it. So if Orange County can't help us, we're on our own. We have to provide the funds ourselves. For Patrick Henry, Cliff Wilkes, our board president, suggests that we phase the study. Or at least we asked to see what it would cost to phase the study so it wouldn't be a huge expense at one time. We've already put aside $140,000 towards stormwater repairs, which is different from the Patrick Henry project. But as we discussed before, we're considering the number one priority for our NCR funds is to go towards the roadside, the chip and seal, repairing the roads and the ditches.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad.
I don't have much to add, only to think that one thing that might be looked at, and I don't know, the board probably has already looked at it, I'm unaware if they did or not, is Lake of the Woods may not be the only community like this that has this problem. And if there's enough interest across the state, there might be some sort of funds, if you get enough members of the state legislature involved, to at least help to some of the costs or take some of that cost. But I don't know if anyone here else is aware that that's been done. But I think that's something to also look at, because if it's a problem, it's going to get worse, not better, the way the climate situation's going. And I think that it's something that the state government could get involved in by getting our local officials, our state delegates, senators involved, that might be able to be of some help. But I think generally what the other folks have said is true. It's going to basically come out of our own hides.
Thank you. Our next question, we'll start with Ms. Forrest. Do you think assessments should be based on property values?
No, I do not. I think assessments, well, let me clarify. Our assessment, no, I do not think our assessment should be based on property values. I think everybody should be paying the same assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
The answer is no. As stated earlier, we have one class of membership, all of equal standings. To do otherwise would create a second class of membership. Secondly, you're run into tax problems if you try to play those games. So, no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zukowski.
Our governing documents won't allow it because the governing documents say it's one fee per lot, the same fee per lot.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad.
Based on what the others have said, we can't do it anyhow. So it's not a good idea.
Mr. Terranaway.
Yeah, the same thing. And if I am correct, and I'm not an attorney, I think that because of our governing documents stating that all lots will be assessed the same, we would be in violation of state and possibly federal laws if we were to try to make that different. We are not a community like a city. We're not a governmental community. We are a corporation, and that came up last year as far as I was concerned about people having more than one vote for candidates and for referendums and so forth, where a person who owns 4, 5, 6 pieces of property gets 4, 5, or 6 votes. And I brought this up to Lee Frame, and he says, you got to realize you are not a government agency. You are a corporation. And if you, as a stockholder in a corporation, if you own 1,000 shares, you get 1,000 votes. If you own 1,000,000 shares, you get 1,000,000 votes. We are a corporation, not a community.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Mr. Brown. If elected, can you commit the required time to personally attend to the full range of board functions and assignments?
Yes. The nominating committee told all of the candidates, as they do every year, that it is a big commitment of time. It does have a major impact on family life. They said there's a minimum of 10 hours of meetings a week plus 20 hours of reading. That is an understatement. Our board members work the equivalent of a full-time job. But yes, I will commit to it. And fortunately this year, my wife has agreed to let me run again. I was a lot smarter this year. I asked her first. So there's a little more peace in the household, but she does understand the implications. And I see Louise Hogue grinning because Bob's coming off the board this year and not rerunning. But it is a commitment of time, and I want to thank all who have served and are serving for doing this extremely important job that does require an awful lot of time. But I am committed to doing it because, as I said before, when I'm into something, I'm all in. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sikowski?
I can say yes, and I'll explain why. I love doing the board work, and I was thinking about that today. Why do I love it so much? And I think it's because I always loved school. I just like learning new things. And let me tell you, every board meeting, there is new information to learn about things I never even thought of before. So it's fascinating, and yes, I can commit the time.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad?
Yes, I have the time. Now that I'm no longer working as an attorney full-time, and I'm basically extinguishing that part of my life, and I'm really retired, I have plenty of time to do this, and I love living here. And the chance to be of help to my fellow folks who live here, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Mr. Turnley?
I am actually looking at it as a possible reduction in my workload. Having attended virtually every board meeting in the past year, having attended every Rules Committee meeting in the past year, having attended every Planning Committee meeting, having sat through 3 days of budget hearings, I think that by being on the board and not being active members in those various communities, although I'd be a liaison to 2 or 3, might actually be a reduction in my workload for what I've done with the community over the past 12 months.
Thank you. Ms. Forrest?
Yes, I have committed to this. Sadly, my husband is looking towards having more microwave dinners. I did let the nominating committee know right from the get-go I'm going to be a grandmother for the very first time, so October 2nd is the due date. I will excuse myself, but as I've been told, don't worry, we're going to find you one way or another. Participate by phone or whatever it takes. But yes, I am totally committed and have the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Ms. Zukowski. What, in your opinion, is the most important job of a director?
I always feel like it is to listen to the community, but the definition, though, by actually what we're trying to think, it's not a rule or a definition, but our job is making policy. And to do that, we look at a lot of information and we talk a lot during board meetings, and we try to make the policies that we think are best for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad?
I think the job of the director is to try to do your best by, one, showing up for all the events, which we just talked about, two, being prepared, and three, giving your best to do anything you can to make sure that you've talked to anyone who can be of help to make sure that you're doing the best job you can. Whatever the situation that comes up, do your homework, study, read the materials, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Turnoy?
Have you ever heard the term show up and shut up? Well, I've tried to do that at most of the committee meetings and board meetings that I've been to. Some people might take exception to the second part of that, but I've tried to listen to what's going on, learn what's going on in the community, and evaluate those goals and attempts, and see how my beliefs and my support will fit into those things as a board member. In addition to the things that we see as non-board members, there is a lot of legal stuff that goes on behind. That's why they have executive sessions. I've been involved in other activities throughout my life that have had some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that the general public doesn't get to see. So it's a matter of weighing all of those commitments and goals for the community, and trying to be a little bit of a representative for everybody, and not showing favoritism to one area or another, and to support the eventual decision that the board makes, and present a united front to the community saying this is what the majority said, whether you are fully in agreement with it or not.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forrest?
There is another saying, a mile wide, an inch deep. I think the most important duty of a director is to turn that inch deep, mile wide saying around. We need to be a mile deep. We need to be engaged. We need to listen. We need to do our homework, study, and be prepared at every meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
I could probably give you three, but the most important of the top three are to be familiar with, understand, read, understand our governing documents. All of the authority that the Board of Directors has comes from three things: state statutes, Virginia Property Owners Association Act, and our governing documents. If we only operate within the confines of those documents, we set policies, as has been mentioned, and those policies must fall within those parameters. Beyond that, we have to be the ones that ultimately pass a blessing on a reasonable budget, and of course, listen to the membership to get the feedback. But our governing documents dictate what we can and cannot do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will start with Mr. Conrad. If elected, what are your goals to hold the line on steadily increasing assessments while maintaining LOW as a vibrant community capable of meeting the needs of the future?
Something I've been thinking about a lot. And one is to, first off, resulting from the embezzlement issue we had, is to make sure that we have carefully rethought and better improved our financial controls, so that one person within the management here couldn't do what happened to us this last year. I think that's an important thing. Trying to think of, can you say, repeat the question again to me? I'm sorry.
Certainly. If elected, what are your goals to hold the line on steadily increasing assessments while maintaining Lake of the Woods as a vibrant community capable of meeting the needs of the future?
Okay. As I just mentioned, that was the first thing. so we don't have those kind of internal issues. And that may mean how we restructure management here at Lake of the Woods that manages that funding, whether it be so that that problem is resolved. Other things are to look at, I'm trying to think of anything else that can, I'm trying to think, I'm running my case. That was the first biggest one I'm thinking of. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with that one. I'll have to forego for right now.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chernoy?
It goes back to something that I've said earlier, part in my opening remarks and in addressing one of the other questions. I want every entity within the community to look at alternatives to what they are doing. Can we accomplish the same goal at a reduced cost? An example was some of the, they wanted shades for the new pool and for the Sweetbriar pool. The request that was made was exorbitant. I think it was $35,000 that they wanted for shades. I found 10 by 10 shades available, cantilever shades available at Home Depot for less than $200 a piece. We could have bought 10 of those and provided the same area of shade for 1/10 the cost of what they were asking for, $35,000. My goal is to have every entity look at every request that they're making and see if they can do it, provide the same service, and do it less expensively. I want to see at least 2 alternatives on any capital expenditure that is going to be considered. It's imperative, particularly with the costs that we're going to be incurring for this stormwater management. Every penny that we can save is going to be beneficial to the community as a whole.
Thank you, Sarah. Ms. Forrest?
I think the first thing we need to do is we need to stick to our budget. We need to prioritize, and we need to take care of the needs first and the wants second. You certainly wouldn't, if you have a leak in your roof, you certainly wouldn't go out and buy a new car knowing full well that you've got to fix the roof of your house. We must take care of what needs to be done and put off for a year or 2 until we have the money to take care of the things that we'd like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
There's a couple of things that we're dealing with the 52-year-old infrastructure. One of the biggest budget is in our maintenance department. One of the things we can try to do is help them achieve greater efficiency. For instance, one thing that we cut out of the budget last year because trying to keep the assessment low was a management software that would help with the scheduling, keeping the crews moving, keeping them busy. That one went by the wayside. The tools, we have to give them the tools with which to work to make more efficiency. We have to look at things such as that. We have to hear the advice of all of our operating centers, our clubhouse, fairways, etc., golf. All of these things, everything we do here is subsidized. Our goal is to make it so that we have less subsidy to all of our wonderful amenities. The more we support them, I've said this before and I'll say it again, we own them. You own part of Fairways, you own part of the clubhouse. Why do you want to eat at Clearwater? But those are just some of the things to keep in mind, that we own these amenities and we support them. So the more we support them, it does make some impact, but real key, we have to get as efficient and effective as we possibly can as we're looking at everything we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sikowski?
Well, you would think that by now I'd have my answer down pat because I had a lot of time to listen. The thing is, we already tried to keep the assessment down. Like, we move things out on the budget when we can't, that we really like to take care of, but we can't. We move things out in the reserves so we can avoid the peaks. We do, oh, and maintenance. Jessie Graves is our director of facilities, and she does a really good job of keeping the cost of maintenance down. Sometimes she does too good a job. So I know that the board has tried and will continue to try, I'm sure, to keep the assessment down. But we don't control inflation. We don't control the cost of living. There's some things that we're going to have to, that the cost is going to go up. The thing that we try to do is try not to let it go up more than 2% or 3% at the outset. Oh, and there's one other thing I'd like to address. The embezzlement keeps coming up, is that we have 5 internal controls in place, that management has put those in place. They were suggested by our forensic auditors and our auditors. And we also had the ad hoc audit committee that is looking at our internal controls. So we are definitely making changes so that that never happens again.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question will start with Mr. Taranoy. How will you work with directors who may have a differing view from yours?
Can I shoot them? No. Everything is a compromise, and you have to be open enough to listen to the other person. And like I said earlier, once a decision is made, whether you agree with it or not, whatever the majority has done, you have to support it. You have to provide a united front when dealing with the public and say, this is what the board has decided, and you can fight tooth and nail during the discussion period, and use the logic that you have, use the background that you have, use the whatever talents you have in trying to convince your compatriots that their thinking is wrong and yours is right. But in the end, you have to go with the majority and support what they do.
Thank you, Sarah. Ms. Forrest?
I think the key word is compromise. Although sometimes when we're trying to discipline our dogs, my husband has one view and I have another, one of us has to give in. And there again, it's compromise. You have to work together. A full body works better than a half a body, so one way or another, no matter how long it takes, this board has to come together as a whole and work together for the good of the community. So there's always compromise. You're never going to agree with everybody on everything. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown?
I spent a career in sales and negotiation, managing radio stations, etc. Everything is negotiable. It becomes a negotiation. That is the key to being able to get along with 6 other people and come to a rational, informed decision. There is a lot of negotiation that is sometimes necessary. There may be, every now and then, there's a home run. Everybody thinks it's a great idea right off the bat. That's not often the case. So there is negotiation, but at the end, as Mr. Taranoy said, the board speaks with one voice. Whether the vote was 4-3, 5-2, 6-1, or unanimous, it's one voice. We make the decision. The board members should not, or do not and should not go around and say, well, I voted against that. It doesn't matter that you voted against it. The decision is the decision. Benita mentioned compromise. When I moved here, I wanted a 2-story house. My wife wanted a 1-story house, so we compromised and got a 1-story house. These things happen. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stokowski?
I have to say, I really enjoy working with the board, and it doesn't bother me if people disagree. And I've learned from people that disagree and have different viewpoints. So I enjoy it.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad.
Over the years, I've worked on a number of boards, directors. Compromise is what you have to do to make things work. But sometimes you come up with, by talking to people, you come up with new ideas that neither the other folks thought of. So sometimes it just says, hold it, let's think about this, take a little bit, let me get my phone on here, and start looking at things. And sometimes you come up with ideas that neither one of the individuals or the group has thought about. So sometimes there's more than one way to skin a cat. So, but you do have to compromise in the end if there's no other good ideas out there. But sometimes you never know. So those are things to look at, is just not say, well, okay, maybe there is something else. Give me a little bit of time to think about it, but you can't simply just walk away. You can't do business that way.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I'd like to make an announcement with a very heavy heart that we have run out of questions. Since we still have 10 minutes left to go, if you would like to take 2 minutes to summarize. Let us start with Ms. Forrest.
Okay, so I had a whole speech written out for my introduction, and I got up here and I forgot half of it, for goodness sakes. So I'm not going to go back and bore you with any other little tidbits that may not make a hill of beans. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening to us. I know you're not going to agree with everything that you've heard up here. Hopefully you agree with some, and we look forward to seeing you again on September the 2nd. And I hope you have a vote for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
Thank you all for coming today. It is good to see people involved with their community. That is the most heartening thing that we as board members see, is good attendance. That means people care. I'm running again because I want to serve the community. As I said earlier, this is something that I felt very strongly about. Feel like it's a calling that I have to do. I just felt I had to do it, and I have enjoyed it immensely, and I want to continue to serve you, and I hope that I can earn your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Sikowski.
Gosh, see, I don't know what to say. I enjoyed being on the board these past 3 years, and I feel like that I want to follow through on some of the things that have happened in the past that we want to see through. I hope you vote for me. I look forward to working on the board and doing my best for the community. There's just one thing I forgot to say while we were hearing questions. Paul mentioned that state government might be involved with the stormwater management. He is so right. Our chair of the External Affairs Committee has already considered reaching out to our delegates, our Virginia people, and seeing if they can help us with stormwater management.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Conrad.
I just want to say that I think that Loa is a very welcoming community. And anything I can do to make that happen. I'm glad that I've had the chance to meet with everybody here today, and I'd like you to consider me for a candidate. I'm now retired. I have plenty of time to help, and whether I'm on this board or any other committees here for Lake of the Woods, I just want to be here. I love being here. I want to help each other. I'm glad to be here. And thank you for coming and staying all this time to listen to us.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chernoy.
Gee, I don't know whether I'm blessed or condemned. Last year, I was also the very last speaker. Said, I'm the one everybody looks forward to. When I quit talking, you can all get up and leave. A lot of people have left in the meantime. Just very brief. I was an ROTC candidate in college, and I went to OCS and got commissioned in '67, spent a year in Vietnam in '69, '70, spent 10 years in retailing, spent 15 years as an insurance agent and broker. Then went into semi-retirement in 95, and in 99 all three of my kids announced that they were getting married in 2000. So I went back to work in a retail environment for Sam's Club and did that for 12 years before moving down here in 2012. With that varied background, I think I bring a little bit of a different background to the board. And hopefully be able, again, I've stressed the finances and the not problems, but challenges that I've had financially over the years, and the way I have overcome that. I want to bring that ability to the board and to the running of this community to maintain the quality that we have, but do it as economically as we possibly can.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank each of you for showing up here today. I know it's been kind of a tedious procedure, but more importantly, we appreciate all your candid and your answers. And last but not least, the Elections Committee for organizing this, and very not the last, the least, is my timekeeper, Judy. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you.
Excellent job. Excellent job, as always.
Thank you. Thank you.